Hi, I'm Marissa. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. I talk about whatever's on my mind right now. Sometimes it's mental health related, sometimes it's other stuff that I'm going through or dealing with. If we're not taught to cope with our emotions at an early age, when it comes to big life events, we're not going to know what to do. And that's why I had a really hard time after my first baby. The postpartum stuff hit me really hard because I had no idea what I was going through. And it was a big shock to me. I'd already been through so much in my life by that point that I thought I've worked through it all by now. You know, I had seen a therapist for 6 months, maybe, not even, thinking that cured all my problems. The body keeps a score. And when I actually had my son, even the day that he was born, when the contractions started, a lot of my past came flooding back. And not necessarily mentally, like in my head, it's not something that I was consciously thinking about, but my hormones and the changes I was going through physically really exasperated all the things that I was holding on to in my body for so long. I had no idea how to cope, and I had no idea how to be a mom, essentially. I had this newborn, and I knew that my sole purpose was to keep him alive. But how to do that, I had no idea. I had zero clue how to actually keep my son alive. I had some instincts, of course, but they were not as strong as you'd think a new mother would be. Because I didn't have support, I felt alone, I felt unseen, I had no confidence, I had no idea what I was doing. When I think back to that time in my life, I wish that I could go back and redo it all. But unfortunately, that isn't how life works. You can't go back. There's no time machines. Yet. Just kidding. But what I did learn was that I didn't want to continue living like this. That first year was the roughest. I was up and down in my emotions all day, every day. And what I really wanted to do in that time period was to stay home and just be a mom. I wanted to adjust. I wanted to enjoy. I wanted to cherish, nurture. That's kind of what I thought motherhood should be like, and what I really was looking forward to doing when I had a baby. But unfortunately, the circumstances we were in at the time didn't allow me to have that lifestyle. Or maybe I could have, but it would have been a much rougher road than we ended up having. We made the decision for me to go back to work. The decision I knew I had to make for our family. That was a sacrifice I had to make at the time in order to make it work for us. But every day I would drive to work with a lump in my throat, and every day that I drove home from work, that lump would dissolve and the tears would stream down my face, because all I wanted was to be home with my baby. And not gonna lie, when I think about that time, I still wish I could have that time back with him, and I've mentioned that already here, but I can't. So that is just what it is. But I knew that I didn't want to continue living like that because it just didn't feel good. But I didn't know how to make any changes because I was so laser focused on survival. I think that's what it came down to in the end. because that's kind of what it's always been about in our family, survival. Being from Bosnia and living through the war, not me, like my family having to escape the war, or my grandparents who had to live through the war, and just the trauma my parents experienced as kids into their adult lives, and then my mom's trauma that continued after she got married to my abusive dad. I think that all of that was really painful and hard, and I didn't want to fester in this pain and continue living my life in it. So after my first year of being a mom, before I got pregnant again, that's when I started therapy. Thank goodness I did, because my therapist did help me. Well, my parents had gone through their own trauma in their lives, and they were never taught how to deal with big emotions either. My dad comes from a bigger family. They had a lot of siblings. I think he was one of 8 or 9 kids. My mom is one of 3, but they both come from a very small village in Bosnia with not a lot of education, and their parents had none either. So if they were not emotionally stable and healthy, how were they supposed to teach their kids to be emotionally stable and healthy? Like, and none of this am I blaming my parents for anything. I just want that to be completely clear, because I understand that the hardships that they've gone through are what shaped them, and therefore that shaped me too. And I just didn't want my kids to end up having the same struggles as me when they got older. So I got help. And 2 years after I started therapy, or no, 1 year after I started therapy, so I was in therapy a year after my son was born, and then after a year, when I had my daughter, she's almost 2 years younger than him, almost to the day. But when I had her, I started to take medicine for my stuff that I was going through. And that was a whole roller coaster in and of itself, which I can make a different video about if that's something that you're interested in hearing. But 10 years later now, it will be 10 years that I've had my first kid this year. And I can finally say that this is the first year I feel like I'm actually somewhat healed from my trauma, and that I can actually learn to deal with my emotions. Even though I still have up and downs, they're under so much better control by me and my body. And I talk with my kids openly about mental health struggles that I have, things that I feel in the moment, and I encourage them to also speak up about this, because it's important. I want them to be able to label their feelings and know how to work through them. So we are learning different DBT skills together, dialectical behavior therapy, so that when we have high emotions, we can come down. And I think that learning those things myself and applying them in my life is going to be the best teacher for my kids. Modeling the behaviors and showing them that change is possible and that a growth mindset is important. I think that will help encourage them and help with their emotional needs and struggles. Hopefully they won't have struggles. Hopefully it will be easier for them to deal with things, but that's why we're here, to teach one another those lessons. But if we're not taught those things, then we can't pass them on. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.